आती है। अब मद संख्या 43 जो श्री बैजयंत पंडा जी का है वो शुरू करें।
Thank you, Honorable Chairman, sir. I rise to move this bill, which is a milestone bill. In many ways, sir, it is a very historic bill. The Rights of Transgender Persons Bill 2014. Sir, as the whole House is aware, this bill from 2014 has been in the queue for being taken up for discussion for the last 3 sessions, where the just concluded bill on the discussion for compulsory voting took priority. So many members participated. Sir, this is also a historic bill for several other reasons. One of the most important reasons sir, is that this bill comes to us after having passed the other house, the Rajya Sabha. So this is historic because for nearly half a century, no private member's bill has become law. As we experienced just now, even a bill that has enormous support from across the political spectrum, for the last nearly half a century, our tradition has become that based on government assurances, the member moving that bill withdraws the bill and it does not become law. For that reason, this Rights of Transgender Persons Bill 2014, having passed in the Rajya Sabha, assumes a very historic angle in that it has the potential for the first time in nearly half a century where we in this august House can pass a private member's bill and make it law, which has not happened for all these decades. Sir, it is another matter that the government itself supports this idea and is preparing a bill along these lines. I will touch upon that. Thoda suniye. Sir.
Pal Sahab.
No. Sir. Sir. And finally, this bill is historic for 3 very fundamentally important constitutional principles which it impinges. Sir, the right to equality, Article 15 of the Constitution, the right to life with dignity and personal liberty, Article 21 of the Constitution, and to some extent, the freedom of speech as prescribed within our Constitution in Article 19. Why these are important, sir, is because taken together, these articles provide that our Constitution must treat every citizen as an equal, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion, and it ought to be the case, sir, irrespective of their gender orientation, of their sexual orientation. Sir, this is not something that is a personal view of mine. This has broad support across the political spectrum. As I mentioned, even the government itself is proposing to bring a bill. Most importantly, it has the backing of our highest courts, sir. It has the backing of high courts, it has the backing of our Supreme Court. And I would like to point out, I will just give a timeline of what progress has happened on this front. But sir, it is important for all of us to recognize that when we look at our own history, when we look at our own culture, I, sir, grew up in Odisha, in Bhubaneswar, and just 30 miles away from where I grew up is the historic Black Pagoda, the temple of Konark, the sun god. And if you go and look at the sculptures at Konark and many other such temples throughout the country, you will see, sir, that we have a rich history which is inclusive, which allows people of any orientation, people of any lifestyle choice, to be allowed to live as free citizens, to be allowed to live life as they wish without discrimination. The thrust of this bill, sir, then, is that shall we tolerate discrimination against a section of our population when all they wish to do is live life by their own choice without causing harm to anybody, without breaking the law? The other great angle of this bill, sir, is compassion. The world's largest democracy has shown repeatedly, time and again, that our greatness comes not from our best achievements. Our greatness comes not from the fact that we are a nuclear power, that we are a space power. Our greatness lies in the fact that we have provided a platform when the weakest of the weak will get the same treatment under law as the rich, as the powerful, as people of any background. Our democracy, sir, our republic has provided this opportunity for categories of our citizens who have been discriminated against for centuries and sometimes for millennia. Over the last nearly 70 years, many such discriminated categories of people, be it of certain castes, be it of certain tribes, be it of any background, have been treated equally by the Constitution, by the law, and have been able to get their rights backed up from this August House and the other August House. But sir, if you look at the transgender community, that is not the case. All of us are aware, sir, that transgenders are treated pejoratively. They are called names which are not worth repeating here, sir. It is not parliamentary to use those names. They are treated not with compassion. They are treated with discrimination. They are jeered at. And they are, in fact, prevented from living a normal life, sir. There is plenty of evidence, and all of us are aware of it, sir, that most transgenders are reduced to begging because they do not get the same opportunities if they want to hold a job. They do not get the same opportunities when they try to get an education. We must have a big heart, sir. We must have compassion that when this community, and I will come into some of their numbers, we must treat them with dignity. We must treat them as human beings. वो exceptions हैं सर. मैं आपको उदाहरण दूंगा. I take the honorable members. I take the honorable members' intervention in the right spirit. As the honorable minister is pointing out, recently, based on court orders, we have had a police officer who is transgender. We have also had people that have contested in local elections, in urban elections, in panchayat elections, and there are many others. But sir, the fact remains. And as honorable members from my home state, Odisha, and my neighboring state, Paschim Bongo, are pointing out, there exists an example of a principle. But sir, that is not the point. I'm sure there are many such exceptions of brave people supported by society in their parts of the country. The reality is that the large majority of the transgender community does not enjoy equal treatment. They do not enjoy dignified treatment. Let me give you an example, sir. Sir, when they are beaten up, when they are stolen from, when they go and try to file an FIR, they do not receive the same treatment that the average Indian citizen receives. They are often jeered at. There are examples where police people also are kind and treat them properly, but that should be the norm. It should not be the exception. So let me give you some points, sir, how this has developed. Sir, in 2009, the Election Commission took a very important first step by allowing so-called eunuchs to choose their gender as other on the ballot paper. Instead of being just male or female, they were allowed to choose other. This was a very significant first step taken by the Election Commission. In 2011 census, for the first time, transgenders were counted as a separate category. Until then, they were counted as males, which itself is odd, sir, because transgenders can be born in the form of a female and choose to be male or vice versa. Sir, there are some estimates, and these estimates vary quite a lot, as to what section of the population are we talking about? What numbers are we talking about? By one estimate, there are just under 5 lakh such people, 4.9 lakh transgender. But there are many other estimates which count the number of transgender population in the country at nearly 25 lakh. And so this number could be much larger because the stigma attached to it is such that people try hard not to live life as they choose, but to hide their gender orientation, to hide their lifestyle. And sir, that is not a life of dignity. That is not a life of dignity. Sir, I once again appeal to all my colleagues in this august house that this may be a small minority community because it is maybe only 25 lakh people. Maybe a little more than that, we don't know. We have to count. That is one of the requirements of the bill, that they be properly enumerated. The big thing here, sir, is that we must have compassion, that no matter how small this group of citizens, they must be treated as equals. Just like our Constitution provides equal rights to Dalits, to Adivasis, to minorities, we must ensure that no matter how small a component of our population they constitute, they must be treated with dignity. That is the basic essence of this bill, which I have the privilege of moving here. Sir, once again I point out that this bill was moved in the other house and passed, which was a historic thing, in April of last year by our honorable colleague, Sri Tiruchi Siva. And in this house also, it has much support from across the aisles. There are other colleagues wanting to speak on this from my right to my left, everywhere, sir. Sir, of the transgender community who have been identified, about 66% live in rural areas. And they face a double difficulty when they try to take advantage of any of the benefits that government provides. Any of the schemes that government has for example, anti-poverty. When they try to get admission in schools and colleges, they do face discrimination. Despite the examples that some of my honorable colleagues have pointed out, the fact is vast majority of them face discrimination, and this is something we should not tolerate. This is something we have to do away with. The proportion of those who have jobs, sir, among the transgender community is only 38%. So let us just think about this for a couple of seconds. Fully 62% of the transgender community do not have jobs. Now, we know in India jobs is a challenge. We know for a fact that India needs to generate 1 million jobs per month, and we are barely creating a fraction of that. But the fact is the transgender community faces a much greater discrimination when it comes to getting jobs. So from 2013 onwards, the transgender community achieved another milestone when they were recognized as a separate category to be issued Aadhaar cards. This is, as you know, the unique identification form using biometrics, and this was another major development. Sir, in 2014 came the most significant development so far, when the Supreme Court was hearing a case of NALSA, which stands for the National Legal Services Authority, versus the Union of India. And while acknowledging the plight of transgender persons, it recognized the community as a third gender. So for the first time, besides the Election Commission, besides the census, the Supreme Court itself accepted in 2014 that in all governmental forms recognition, besides having male and female, you can have other, the third gender. In 2015, sir, the Reserve Bank of India has also taken this in the same spirit, one step forward, and has asked banks to add third gender column in all of its forms. Sir, from last year, from 2015, several universities have started taking progressive steps. So it is true when honorable members point out that some members of the transgender community are getting admission, but that needs to be spread to everybody. Sir, Delhi University and Jamia are going to follow the example set by Jadavpur University, which was the first university of a national stature to introduce the third gender option in all its official forms. So the guiding principle of this bill is that one's gender orientation, one's sexual orientation, should not go against them being treated, being discriminated against in any fashion or any way. So this impinges one area where there has been a lot of heated debate and a lot of controversy also. So I want to touch upon it a little bit, sir. It has to do with Section 377, which has to do with Section 377, sir, as you know, criminalizes homosexuality and the LGBT community. And there have been efforts to challenge that, sir. Only in the last session, there was an attempted private member's bill in this House, which was not accepted for introduction because many members here did not feel that that was appropriate. And as many members are undoubtedly aware, this is a matter that has now gone to a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court. Sir, I will just come as to, this is not the subject matter, but it is somewhat slightly related. So I will come to that issue. Sir, on Section 377, which is a British-era law which criminalizes certain activities, criminalizes homosexuals, there was a Delhi High Court judgment some years ago which said that this was not constitutional, that it discriminated against certain categories of citizens, but that was overruled by the Supreme Court. And this is a battle that has been going on by a certain organization called the Naz Foundation, which has been fighting in the courts on the constitutional principle. And although the Supreme Court had overruled the Delhi High Court, it has recently accepted the petition to review its own decision to a greater constitutional bench. As I understand, it is going to be a 7-judge constitutional bench. And while that matter is there in the Supreme Court, I think we'll have to wait and see what decision they take, and then we can respond appropriately. Sir, my point here is that though today's subject on transgender bills is not about 377, because here we are talking about treating them with dignity, about not discriminating against them, about making sure that the law treats them as equal citizens. But here we are not talking about the repeal of Section 377. That is a bigger issue. It is a wider issue. This is not the exact same issue, but there is some small overlap, undoubtedly, because the larger community of LGBTQ, which is lesbians, gays, transgenders, bisexual, homosexual, queers, this is a larger issue, and that community is far larger than the 25 lakhs which have been enumerated only for the transgender rights. But, sir, many people feel that these two are linked in the sense that once we take a viewpoint that we must treat our transgender community, our transgender citizens, with equal rights, with equal dignity, with equal treatment of the law, then that's a constitutional principle that is being set. But these, I would say, are two parallel things that are going on. They are not exactly the same, because here this bill does not propose to do anything with Section 377. This is purely about dignity and equality before the law for the transgender community. Sir, I have alluded to our own history and our own culture. I have alluded to our own temple architecture. If you look at our own scriptures, if you look at our own mythology, there are plenty of examples that transgenders in our history, in our mythology, in our scriptures are not uncommon. They have been. Shikhandi in Mahabharata is one, but there are so many examples. I am not an expert in the subject, but I have heard there are experts on the subject who have written about it.
Before he concludes, I think it would be better for him to answer. In the Hindi version of this bill, the transgender has been translated into विपरीत लिंग व्यक्तियों के अधिकार विधेयक. तो मैं जानना चाहता हूँ, मेरा हिंदी इतना मजबूत नहीं है, पर यहाँ कई लोग हैं जिनको हिंदी अच्छी तरह आती है. ये विपरीत लिंग क्या है? आपके बिल है, गलत है, तो इस बारे में थोड़ा रोशनी.
My honorable colleague Shri Mahtab has brought up an issue with which I am not familiar, because I have not filed the Hindi version of the bill. I have filed the English version of the bill, and since English में I can only talk about the English version of the bill. तो वो तो बता दिया मैं, वो तो मैं बता दिया. महताब जी, आप ये प्रश्न पूछने में ही आप ये पूछे कि उनको आती है या नहीं है, तो ये that itself I think indicates that we put too much emphasis on gender, whereas we should put emphasis on humanity.
This bill comes from Rajya Sabha. The translation is also comes from Rajya Sabha.
So we can ask them for a clarification. Sir, my point is, whether unko aati hai ya unko aata hai, I think we people from the East, we make a mistake sometimes because we treat gender differently in our language, and that is the very point, sir. The point is, we treat gender equally, and I think we should all treat gender equally. The whole point of this bill, sir, is that we treat them as human beings, not as males, females, or other, or transgender. We treat them as human beings, sir. We must all have big hearts. We must all have compassion for people who are different from us. And that is the only purpose of this bill, sir. I was going to also allude, sir, that apart from our own legacy, apart from what we have learned from our history and our culture, other countries are beginning to take steps to ensure that transgender community in their countries are treated equally, sir. Sir, we could consider, for example, the example of Portugal, which is believed to today have the most expeditious and transparent procedures for establishing gender identity for those, not just in the transgender community, but in any of these communities. We can take the example of Argentina, sir, which has not the cumbersome procedures, because sometimes people have gender reassignment medical procedures. It does not require any of that. It requires people to choose their lifestyle and treat them on that basis as taking their word for it, sir. Sir, this government has started procedures unrelated to this in many ways, saying that a citizen's self-certification on many kinds of forms should be good enough. It should not require a gazetted officer, should not require a government servant to authenticate what the citizen is self-declaring. This is the principle. When you look at some other countries, how they have provided, if you look at what our Election Commission, Reserve Bank of India, Census is already doing, this should apply all across, sir. Apply to all government forms, apply to all education application forms, apply to job applications, sir. Because a citizen's self-certification should be enough, unless there is evidence otherwise, unless there is evidence that the citizen is not to be relied upon. Sir, I come to the point that the government itself is supporting this move and has set up, it had set up a committee and taken some steps and has brought a bill, sir. And here I want to point out this a very important, significant difference between what the government's bill proposes and what this private member's bill proposes. Sir, although both the bills provide principles that should guide the government authorities, but one key principle of, and I quote this, of respect for difference and acceptance of transgender persons as part of human diversity and humanity, that aspect is not there in the government bill. This is a core fundamental principle which is there in this bill, which has been passed by the Rajya Sabha and which is here before us today, sir. Respect for diversity and acceptance of that diversity is what is crucial, sir. And that is why it is important that we must consider this bill in depth. And sir, a point will come when we will have to take a decision what we want to do with this bill. I would like to mention to my honorable colleagues here that we have the opportunity of making history. We have the opportunity, if we pass this bill for the first time in nearly half a century, that we members of parliament can initiate and make law and not depend only on the government of the day to bring law. We are not at different purposes. The government itself wants to bring a similar law. But if we pass this bill and make it law, it would be a historical going back to what we had until the early 1970s, when it used to be that private members' bills could get passed. Sir, this is the point worth dwelling on for a little bit. Sir, if you look at democracies all over the world, it is not only government bills which get passed, sir. If you look at democracies like America, if you look at UK and Canada and Germany and Australia, sir, it is quite common that ordinary members of parliament, whether they be part of the governing side of the benches or from the opposition side of the benches, they can introduce bills, and if these bills are popular, if they can make a very good argument and if they can seek the support of their colleagues, such bills can pass. And I want to, sir, appeal to all members, those who are present here today and those who are absent but may be here when the time comes to take that decision on this bill. Please keep this in mind. We have got this historic opportunity since the early 1970s for the first time. It would be a wonderful thing if we can pass the law. We are not against the government, sir. We are not against the government's bill. Both are very similar in many ways. I would also beseech the government that in the case of this bill, being that it has already passed the Rajya Sabha, being that it is about something not controversial, this bill is not controversial. This bill has the support of the Supreme Court. This bill has the support of the other house. This bill has the support of any right-thinking person, sir, who would want to have a small heart, who would want to discriminate against transgender people. But we can make history, sir. We can pass this bill. The government wants to implement this law in any case. We can pass this bill and create history that our parliament goes back to its old glory, that any bill which has support of the majority of the members can become the law. It does not have to be that bills which get support. We saw a bill now, sir, which has enormous support from a lot of people. But it has become tradition that bills are not put to the vote, that they are withdrawn by the proposer. I believe, sir, we should break from that and go back to our original tradition. I believe, sir, we should go to the tradition when any one of us can introduce a bill. And if we can get the support of enough number of members of parliament, that should become law. And we have that opportunity here today for the first time. Sir, this bill will make it law, make the constitutional principle of non-discrimination into law, so that when people of the transgender community go to file police cases, they will be treated with equality and dignity. When they go for jobs, they will be treated with equality and dignity. It will provide incentives for example, the private sector to provide jobs to them. Sir, I'll tell you why it becomes important for us to consider passing this bill. Sir, although the government is in the same line of thinking that the constitutional principle of equality can be made into a bill for this case, for transgenders, sir, an expert committee was set up by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment and to study the problems faced by the transgender community and to make suggestions. So that committee gave its report as far back as January 27th of 2014. These were forwarded to all the states and union territories for appropriate action, and 16 states and union territories have responded. The others at the time of this have not yet responded. Sir, I gave the example of the Supreme Court in the NALSA case, which has ruled that they should not be discriminated against and that they be treated as the third gender. However, sir, in October of 2015, the ministry filed a petition in the Supreme Court. I stand corrected, sir. The ministry filed a petition in September 2014 seeking clarifications to this judgment in the Supreme Court. And as a result, this matter has got stuck. It is pending, and a final decision has not yet been taken. So although the Supreme Court had given a ruling, it is not a fact that throughout the government, all these papers, all the forms of different departments, they do not yet have the option of the third gender because it is stuck in court. And some states indeed are taking a progressive stand. I think it is very heartening, sir, that the state of Kerala in 2015 took a progressive step to provide a level playing field for equality, granting equal access to social and economic opportunities, resources and services, the right to equal treatment under the law, equitable rights in all decision-making bodies, and so on and so forth for the transgender community. Sir, I was going to mention some of the cases that other honorable members have pointed out, such as in Tamil Nadu, the first transgender police sub-inspector, Prithika Yashini, by the order of the Madras High Court, which also mandated inclusion of third category in the next recruitment process. And the good news is that only on the 15th of this month, 15th of February, she has got her joining orders and taken charge. This is again one historic step, but these are small, these are few steps that needs to change. Other countries are also going ahead, sir. I gave examples of countries which are far away. Let me give you the example of next door, Nepal, sir. In Nepal, Bhumika Shrestha is an activist who became the first Nepali citizen to travel on a passport carrying the designation O for other, rather than M for male or F for female. And this could be the future for international travel so that there is no discrimination. Sir, I had referred to the court judgments in both the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court judgment on the constitutional principle of equality. I think it is important to read out what Justice Mrudul in the Delhi High Court judgment of October 2015 held in favor of a transgender person, citizen, and I quote this, sir. Every human being has certain inalienable rights, and gender identity and sexual orientation are fundamental to the right of self-determination, dignity, and freedom of the individual. This is something that we should take into our hearts, sir, and stop the practice of discriminating against them in various fields. Many other things are happening. Films are getting made, documentaries are getting made, film festivals are happening. One of the most heartening examples, sir, was again just this month when it was reported that in Maharashtra, the police in Thane had started an initiative called Police Mitra, in which 1,350 transgender persons were given training, including physical training, medical screenings, ID cards, and, sir, most heartening, they assist the police with law enforcement functions such as crowd control and traffic control. Can we think of a better example than this, when the very places where they were getting discriminated against, when they used to go to the police to seek justice, now here we have an example where the police are co-opting them, where the police are treating them in an inclusive manner, where they are getting the training, they are given the dignity of assisting the police for traffic control, for crowd control. These are the sort of examples that we must support, sir, and not just by cheering on such examples, of course we must do that, but by making it the law. We cannot just leave it as a constitutional principle that every citizen must be treated equally. We must make the laws, and we must undo the laws that we have on our books from the last 200 years, which provide discrimination against citizens. We must do that. I gave the example of Thane police in Maharashtra. I want to give an example of the Kolkata police from January of this month, where they have accepted the West Bengal government's proposal to empower transgender persons and accepting them into civic police volunteer force. Sir, I realize I have spoken for quite some time, and there are other members who wish to speak on this subject, and I don't want to continue this for the sake of continuing it. Although, sir, I was hoping that we could take this into the next session where we can have more members and dwell and take a decision on that historic opportunity that we have today for passing such a bill, not just because it is about the rights of a minority community of transgenders, but also about the constitutional opportunity today that we have of re-establishing the supremacy of Parliament, of re-establishing that it is the job of Parliament to make laws, not just laws that are brought by the government of the day, but laws that are suitable for the country for this time. And since the government has no opposition to the principle of the law, in other cases, sir, they say that please withdraw this bill, we will bring a similar bill. Here also they have prepared a bill. It's not that they are just saying it, but here we have the opportunity of this bill having passed the other house And if we can pass it in this House, sir, it would be a tremendous assertion of the supremacy of Parliament, and with that, sir, I would like to submit that we consider this bill as an opportunity to impress upon the rest of the country that right from the highest temple of democracy, we are sensitive to the needs of every citizen, no matter how small their community, no matter how marginalized their community, that we have the heart to bring them into the mainstream. Thank you, sir.